Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. So I want to say to the millions of people who voted for us in 2019, many of them voting Conservative for the first time, thank you for that incredible mandate, the biggest Conservative majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job, my duty, my obligation to you to continue to do what we promised in 2019.
And so, as they say, including our audience, them's the breaks, I guess. You just saw a political leader, for the most part, in most ways, step down as a result of scandals and poor performance and terrible explanations for the actions and a whole lot of things. There were actual consequences. They can still exist, if only in the UK. Now, Boris Johnson, who is like apparently planning to stick around, and we'll get, like, in some ways, and we'll get into what exactly he might be doing that for and what he might be getting out of that, is resigning as both the Prime Minister of the UK as well as the leader of his party. He says that he tried to persuade his colleagues that it would be eccentric to change leaders currently, noting that the Tories are only a few points behind in the polls. Says, I regret I was unsuccessful in those arguments, blaming the party's herd instinct for his defenestration. One of my favorite words. It's so rarely used these days. But anyway, it follows a couple of really bad days for him in terms of people jumping ship. 59 members of his ministers had resigned at the time of his remarks. And that began like less than 48 hours ago. And we also recently found out that he had named a conservative MP to his government, despite apparently being aware of previous sexual misconduct allegations. That is apparently a thing that, like in America, will not necessarily stop you from getting a position, but unlike in America, is something bad enough to be used against you. It's a scandal that people actually would care about and might result in you stepping down. So in any event, even as late as last night, he had been saying he planned to stick around. They always say that up until literally the sentence where they resign. It doesn't mean anything, but he is leaving. So Ben, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be really interesting. Like, I guess like the most interesting component of this to me is where the Labour Party is gonna go in the UK, because they've taken like a pretty hard right turn and unfortunately seem to be learning the wrong lessons from the Democratic Party in the United States by squeezing out more left figures like Jeremy Corbyn. And I think this might be an instance of Labour failing upwards. I'm afraid they might take this as evidence that like it was like a good idea to sort of squeeze out the more left elements within their party, as opposed to just recognizing it to be the failure of the Conservatives in the UK and purely the failure of the Conservatives of the UK. So maybe they go into this sort of brinksmanship that we see in the United States, where the left and right both challenge each other to see how terrible they can get.
That'll be fun. Yeah, no, I think that that's a good read. Look, I would say, I guess to some extent, this is good. I suppose as a counter reaction to even the historic wins that he was talking about there. By the way, I get that you would do this, what he said at the close of those remarks that we showed you, but it feels a little bit less deranged, but a little bit Trumpy to me. Like, you're stepping down right now, dude. So like pointing out that things had gone well for you just a couple of years ago, that makes it worse, not better. Like if you had won a very narrow, tenuous majority and then were forced out a couple of years later, that's bad enough. But you overwhelmingly won and then were forced out. Do you see how that makes it worse, Boris? But apparently not. He's an eternal optimist, I guess. And look, there's a lot that I don't know about Boris Johnson. I would say virtually everything. I would say, look, obviously his enthusiastic support for the splitting apart, the UK and in the EU and all that. That to me is enough to celebrate at least a little bit for him stepping out. But there's nothing I like more on the damage report than admitting when I've reached the limit of my knowledge of a topic, and I've never considered myself much of an expert on UK politics. And I'm gonna be completely honest to those living in the UK right now. Things have gotten so bad here in America for the past couple of years that even I, a person who tried to stay abreast with the politics of a number of other countries, who in graduate school took quite a bit of international relations classes, I have a harder time focusing on it considering how dire things have gotten here in the US.
Yeah. It's like being on a crashing airplane. You got to put your own mask on first, and we're just living that every single day.
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's a bad thing, by the way. We need solidarity, across now more than ever, probably. And so it's an impulse that I try to fight. But anyway, really fast, I want to give you a couple more details, just that we've got prepared and that I think are fun. Asked who should replace him. One MP said, anyone. My mom is free. I love that. Anyway, and then finally, oh God, I love this so much. So why stick around as like caretaker or whatever for a few months until September, until October, or whatever the timeline is supposed to be? Well, they say one potential explanation is that he and his wife want to host a party at Chequers, this like 16th century manor house. It's owned by is that why? That couldn't possibly be why. It's so small-minded, it's so personal. That couldn't possibly be, well, no, that actually tracks. I could sort of see that. I could see Trump doing that here. Why not? Sophie is saying, the invitations have already been sent, John. Well, then I guess, sure. Then in that case, I mean, you can't reschedule, you can't. Aren't they digital? Couldn't you just update the location? But apparently that's why. And I assume that right now, I mean, there is a scramble going on both inside of the Conservative Party and then obviously, as you were pointing out, in the opposition to put something together. It's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Any other thoughts?
No, I don't know. I just think that's funny. That's just so funny. But like, we gotta have a party first, right? We gotta have a party first. Real priorities right here. This is, you can tell, he's somebody that was always prioritizing the average working class person in the UK,
Well, it is sort of perfect, specifically for Boris Johnson, that if this is the reason, then it would be his dire desire for a massive party that would be causing him to stick around, considering the scandals and all that. But that said, we do want to, we've given our perspective on this development. We want to give the American rights perspective. So to that end, here's a bit of conversation from Fox and Friends about this.
What has happened over the last number of months and years is the British people did not trust him. He would say one thing and would do something else, and then would pop up in the tabloids. And then with this thing, it's a question of integrity. He has refused to go, even though people have been calling for him to hit the pavement for a while.
Yeah, and if there's one thing that Fox and Friends can't take, it's a politician who has received a clear message from the voters that they're not wanted anymore, just trying to stick around. They won't accept that, Ben.
It's literally this, it's the Spider-Man meme, right? But that's all of politics right now. I feel like all of politics in the UK and the United States is just the Spider-Man meme where everybody's pointing at each other. And if it's not that, then it's the hot dog costume. It's we're trying to find the guy who did this. And that's just the entire political atmosphere right now.
Yeah, and it's like some might say, well, you got to be fair. What about the Democrats? Okay, well, what about? First of all, we're going to be talking about Biden in just a minute, but seemingly nobody wants Biden to run again, and he's not getting the message. They don't care. They're in it for themselves. They will stick around as long as they want. And along the way, the responsibility that we would have, I would say, in our capacity, and also people like Fox and Friends, is I don't know, to maybe like understand the context a bit, identify differences and similarities. So for instance, if people gave a huge mandate to Boris Johnson and then started to have an issue with him because of his weird scandals, need to party constantly, which gives across the idea that he's not taking things seriously, giving a strong signal to the voters that he doesn't take sexual misconduct among the people in his employ seriously, not taking COVID seriously, and also making a weird and self-destructive break with the international community. If they've started to decide that all those things are bad, in the UK, maybe we can understand that people might not like it here in the US either. And so if you're shocked to see that the people could turn on Boris Johnson, maybe it's not so impossible to imagine that they would turn on Trump for basically those exact same reasons.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.